And now, the season finale. Chapter 35, Here Comes the Sun. There's no such thing as the perfect boss. I know this because bosses, at the end of the day, are just people. They're no different than you and I. They make mistakes, they fall short, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't expect more from them. In fact, we must. Because leadership isn't just another rung on the ladder. It's a calling, not a consolation prize for tenure. Not a checkbox on a career development plan. To lead is to hold a position of trust, and that trust comes with weight. A manager's job is not just to manage tasks or hit KPIs, it's to take care of people. That's the charge, that's the assignment. And that responsibility isn't theoretical, it's deeply personal. Livelihoods hang in the balance. The ability for someone to put food on their table, to keep a roof over their head, to care for their family. Those things are directly impacted by the decision a leader makes. That should carry moral weight. That should matter. Choosing to step into leadership shouldn't be something you stumble into. It should be something you prepare for, because leadership at its core is a balancing act. You have to answer upward to your boss, to your budget, to the bottom line, but none of that gets done without the people under you. And those people, they aren't just resources to be maximized. They're human beings with needs, with limits, with lives. Good leaders understand that. They become stewards of their teams, protectors of time, believers in potential. They coach, they support, they advocate. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. And no, they won't always get it right, but they should always be guided by principle. The problem is, too many people enter leadership with none of that in mind. They chase the power, the title, the authority, but they skip the part where they examine their own values, their own capacity for care, their ability to listen, to reflect, and to lead with humility. And that's where the damage begins. Because power without character isn't leadership. It's control. And the system we work in, it doesn't just tolerate that, it rewards it. From the Hyman Brand Studio, I'm JD Hyman, and this is a Hyman Podcast. This show lives at the intersection of the American political system, the weight of the human experience, and the conversations too many people are afraid to have. Equality, while promised, is rarely delivered. That's why we're here. To challenge systems, to tell the truth, and to hold space for the stories that demand to be heard. Some stories shake the world, others shake us awake. Every one of them deserves to be told. Once again, my name is JD, and this is the Hyman Podcast. Part 1, The Cloud. This whole season has been about what happens when leadership breaks down, when the people in charge stop leading and start controlling or hiding or pretending nothing's wrong. In the first episode, we talked about what it feels like when your manager's indifference starts to feel like a personality trait. When you bring them a problem and they look at you like you're the inconvenience. We've unpacked what toxic culture really is, how it thrives on fear, isolation, and silence. We've talked about those moments when someone says something out of touch, so dismissive you have to laugh just to keep from losing it. And we talked about what happens when that culture becomes normal, when HR stops protecting people, when just get through the day becomes the new mission statement. But here's the thing I didn't fully expect when I started this season. I didn't realize how many people, how many of you were going through the exact same thing. The messages, the emails, the quiet Me Too moments, it wasn't just validation. It was evidence. Evidence that we're not crazy. This isn't just one bad boss or one toxic team. This is a pattern. And if we're going to survive it, we have to stop trying to do it alone. For me, that shift started with the people around me, the coworkers who saw what I saw, who started quietly calling it what it was, just loud enough for each other to hear. The shared glances during meetings, the subtle check-ins after a tense exchange, the jokes, the sarcasm. The sun will come out tomorrow, we'd say after someone got steamrolled. Not because we believed it, but because in that moment, someone else did too. We turned those tiny moments into light because even in a place where the weather never seemed to change, we found ways to hold each other up. And that's leadership too. And sometimes leadership looked like rebellion. Not the loud kind, not a walkout, not a confrontation in a conference room. I mean the quiet rebellion. The moments you survived by making each other laugh. Like when we got told we were too emotional for bringing up unsafe working conditions, so we started calling ourselves the dramatic department. Or when the water came out of the faucet brown and instead of taking accountability, we got told it was probably fine. And we would just say, your water is brown. That became a running joke for us. Anytime something was clearly wrong and someone tried to downplay it, we'd just shrug and say, well, your water is brown. It sounds ridiculous, and it was, but that was the point. We weren't trying to be petty. We were trying to stay sane. And in a place where nobody was willing to speak the truth, that little joke became our way of saying, we see what's happening. We're not gaslighting ourselves. We laughed, we rolled our eyes, and we held each other up. Because even if leadership failed us, we weren't going to fail each other. In the middle of all of that, brown water, empty promises, and fake positivity, there were people who made it bearable. People like Keisha. She didn't have a fancy title or a big office, but when things got hard, when someone was struggling, she showed up. She could read the room before she even walked in. She remembered birthdays, brought snacks, and noticed when someone was quieter than usual. And then there was Jean, the one who always seemed to know when a joke was needed and when it wasn't. The one who wasn't afraid to pull you aside, look you in the eye, and say, you don't deserve to be treated like this. Keisha made you feel safe. Jean made you feel seen. Neither of them had power in their own right, not by title, not by org chart, but if we had leaders in that season, it was them. They led by showing up. They led by telling the truth. And they weren't alone. There are always people like that, people who lead from the middle, not the top. They don't need permission to make an impact. They just need space and the rest of us to follow their light. We get leadership twisted sometimes. We start believing that the title makes someone a leader, that because someone can approve time off or run a meeting, they must have the wisdom to guide people. But the truth is, a title can't teach empathy. It can't make you trustworthy. It can't make you care, and it doesn't make you brave. And just because someone has a higher title than you, it doesn't mean they're smarter than you. It doesn't mean they're right. It just means someone gave them power. But power without character, that's not leadership. That's just control. I've had a lot of managers in my life, some good, some forgettable, and two who should have never been allowed to lead anyone. Aaron Gaffney and Cheryl Lauer. I rarely say their names aloud, but if we're going to have an honest conversation about what toxic leadership looks like, how it operates, how it spreads, and how it damages people, then we have to name the thing for what it is. These two didn't just fall short of leadership. They twisted it into something and weaponized it. Boston, as I often call her, was my manager at the Forensic Mental Health Hospital. I served as the business manager, a role that carried weight of a CFO. I was responsible for budgets, financial oversight, and the economic infrastructure that helped keep the hospital running. It was a high-stakes environment. Patients with serious mental health needs, regulatory scrutiny, and lives quite literally on the line. Leadership mattered. Clarity mattered. Character mattered. Unfortunately, we got Boston instead. Cheryl Lauer, by contrast, was my manager at the Ohio Department of Taxation, where I worked as a tax examiner. I was tasked with conducting audits across a number of specialized tax categories, everything from IFTA and IRP to employer withholding and commercial activity tax. It was technical, exacting work. and it required trust. The kind of trust that should exist between a manager and the people they're supposed to support. But in Cheryl's department, that trust didn't exist. What existed instead was fear, control, and subtle sabotage. The jobs were different, but the playbook was the same. Boston entered the hospital like she was on some messianic mission. Here to save the place was the unspoken motto. But it became clear almost immediately that honesty was not in her toolkit. She was loud, reactive, and obsessed with control. She screamed at staff in front of others, she berated people in meetings, and she played favorite so blatantly it felt cartoonish. I watched her pass over Nita, a talented, experienced professional, for a role she had earned simply because Boston couldn't control her. She gave the job instead to someone whose only qualification was blind loyalty. That's when I knew what kind of leader we were dealing with. Cheryl, on the other hand, took her time. She didn't shout, she didn't rage, she smiled while she watched. She took notes. She listened in ways that made you feel seen at first until you realized she was cataloging your vulnerabilities. She once asked me to monitor my coworkers and report back. At the time, I rationalized it. I told myself maybe she was protecting the team, but eventually, that same knife she used on others found its way in my back. That's when it all clicked. Her goal wasn't development or leadership, it was surveillance. What they had in common, what made them dangerous, was that neither of them led with integrity. They didn't want people, they wanted pawns. Their loyalty had nothing to do with values. For Boston, it meant covering her butt and keeping secrets in-house. For Cheryl, it meant obeying without question and never outshining her. Boston gave passes to people who were incompetent or unethical as long as they defended her. Cheryl gave no passes, but only because her version of power came from silently keeping a ledger of every perceived slight until the moment she could use it to break you. They both hated being questioned. They saw inquiry as rebellion. They were allergic to feedback, threatened by competence, and dismissive of their own superiors. I watched them belittle their own bosses behind closed doors, presenting themselves as the real brains in the room. They created cultures where truth was inconvenient and transparency was optional. It didn't matter how well you performed, what mattered was how well you played the game. Boston's reign extended across an entire hospital. She fostered a culture of silence and fear that trickled down from the executive suite all the way down to the night shift nurses. People knew better than to speak up. Cheryl had a smaller reach, just one department, but the psychological grip she had over her team was no less corrosive. People second-guessed everything. They whispered, they kept receipts, no one felt safe. And I was not immune. I'm someone who comes to work with purpose. I lead with clarity. But under both of them, I found myself shrinking. I started to question my own attitude. I wondered if I was overreacting, if maybe I was the problem. That's the show, Silent Burn of Toxic Leadership. It makes you doubt your own compass. It isolates you. It breaks you down so slowly, you forget what you used to believe about yourself. But here's the thing, they didn't destroy me. Boston and Lauer made me into the leader I am today, but not in the way that you think. They taught me what not to do. They made me protective of the people around me. They made me more honest, more transparent, more aware of the silent ways power can corrupt. They taught me that some people, no matter their rank or resume, should never be trusted with the care of others. They also taught me something that took time to admit. I'm not a bad person, no matter what they said. And they were wrong about me. Some people are just broken, so broken that they don't even recognize the damage they do. They lead from pain. They punish through silence. They cloak their insecurity in policy and title. And by the time the damage is visible, it's already metastasized into culture. If I could say one thing to each of them, truthfully, freely, with nothing held back, it would be this. To Boston, you are a horrible person. You may have good intentions, but the road to hell was paved with those. And at the pace you're going, you're going to be there in no time. You once asked me if I needed a ride to the airport. What I should have said was that I wouldn't get in your car if it was the last ride out of hell. To Lauer, I don't know what happened to you, who hurt you, or how long you've been carrying that weight, but it's clear you've weaponized your pain. And the only way you know how to cope with hurt is to hurt other people. Leadership is a sacred responsibility. It's not a playground for broken egos or a mirror for the insecure. And if we don't start naming that out loud, if we don't start drawing lines between power and cruelty, then we keep promoting people like them. People who confuse control with competence, fear with respect, silence with loyalty. People who would rather rule a kingdom of ash than serve a community of equals. And the next time someone like them asks me for trust, the answer will be quite simple. You couldn't even be trusted with your own humanity. And while we're at it, years of experience doesn't mean much if you haven't learned anything from them. Time served isn't the same as growth. You can have 20 years on paper and still lead like someone who's been repeating year one on a loop. Power and tenure might get you the office, but respect, that's earned every single day. Toxic workplaces often confuse the two. They hand out titles and hope people will follow, but all they're really doing is managing fear. Real leadership, that looks a lot like what Jean did, like what Keisha did, like what so many people do every single day, without credit, without recognition, and without the authority they deserve. Real leaders are the ones who tell the truth when it's inconvenient, who speak up even when it costs them something. They ask the hard questions, not because it's easy, but because it's right and because it's necessary. They step up when everyone else stays quiet. They don't wait for permission to do the right thing. They pay attention to who's being overlooked, who's being talked over, and who's carrying more than they should have to. Real leaders create space instead of taking it. They make space for other people to speak. They protect the people who are too tired to protect themselves, and they don't lead to be seen. They lead so others won't feel invisible. And the hardest part? Sometimes those people don't have a seat at the table. Sometimes they're passed over, dismissed, even punished for being the kind of leader a toxic workplace doesn't know how to handle. But they lead anyway. Because leadership isn't about control. It's about care. It's about making sure the people around you aren't walking through the dark alone. Hi there. Support for the Hyman Podcast comes from listeners like you. Each episode is produced with the intent to tell the truth, elevate the human experience, and to create space for hard conversations that matter. If this work resonates with you, consider joining our listener support program. Contributions start at just $3 a month, and every little bit helps sustain this mission. To learn more, visit us on the web at www.jdhyman.com. We also welcome collaboration with brands and organizations who share these values and want to engage meaningfully with our audience. If that sounds like you, we'd love to connect. For now, let's get back to the episode. Part 2, the light. She used to say it like it was supposed to fix something. The sun will come out tomorrow. She said it when we raised concerns, when we talked about burnout, when we asked for basic respect. It was her way of saying, this doesn't matter. You don't matter. But what she never understood is this. The sun coming up tomorrow doesn't change a damn thing when every day feels like a storm. When you're working in a toxic culture, when leadership gaslights you, when people get punished for telling the truth, the sunrise doesn't help. People do. The coworkers who check in after a meeting, the ones who crack a joke to break the tension, the ones who see what's happening and say it out loud. That's what gets you through. This season wasn't just about bad bosses. It was about what it takes to survive them. It was about how we learn to lead when leadership fails us, how we find each other in the mess, how we hold the line together when no one else will. If you're in it right now, I need you to hear this clearly and in this order. 1, you're not imagining things. The discomfort, the tension, the voice in your head saying this isn't how it's supposed to be, that's real. Trust it. 2, you are not too sensitive. Wanting to be treated with dignity and respect isn't weakness, it's basic. And the people who call that being too much are usually the ones offering too little. 3, you are not overreacting. When you speak up, when you question things, when you draw a line, that's not drama, that's survival. 4, you are in a broken system. It's not you, it's the culture, it's the silence, it's the way they normalize dysfunction and call it resilience. And 5, you are not alone. Even when it feels like no one else sees what you see, someone does, someone always does. And together, you can hold the line until the light breaks through. There are people like Jean and Keisha in every building, quietly holding it together. They don't have titles, they don't need them, because people follow them anyway. People trust them. People don't give their best because they're afraid of punishment. They give their best when they feel seen, respected, and protected. When someone has earned their trust, not demanded it, that's when people show up without being asked. That's when they stay late without resentment. That's when they carry more than their share, not out of obligation, but out of loyalty. Not because they have to, but because they know you do the same for them. The sun doesn't come up because someone in the executive suite says it will. It comes up because we rise, because we show up for each other, because we create the light. We lived under that cloud for a long time. Some days it felt like it would never break, like the weight of silence, fear, and fake smiles would always hang over us. We kept waiting for something to change, for someone in power to do the right thing, for the sun to finally come out. They kept telling us it would. The sun will still come up tomorrow. But what they never understood, what they still don't, is that the sun doesn't change the system. It doesn't fix the damage. It doesn't make the air any easier to breathe. We do that. The truth is, the system we were taught to believe in is often run by people who've forgotten how to lead or never learned how to care. But more importantly, and the thing that gives me hope is this: as long as there are people willing to stand up and name what's broken, there's a chance to fix it. As long as we keep showing up for each other, the silence doesn't win. We don't have to wait for the clouds to part. We don't have to hope for someone else to bring the light. We bring it. With every truth told, every boundary drawn, every voice that refuses to go quiet. Because in the end, we are not what's been broken. We are what breaks through. We are the sun. My name is JD. This is the Hyman Podcast. I'll see you next season. This episode of the Hyman Podcast was produced by the Hyman Brand Studio. I serve as the show's writer, director, and executive producer. Additional research and story development by Whitney Hall and Sherith Guest. Creative consulting by Monica Taylor Hunt. Visual branding by Kevin Aki with additional graphic design by Grant Furness. Our theme song Canary was produced and mixed by Jim Yosef with additional music licensed through Epidemic Sound. If today's episode moved you, challenged you, or made you think, share it, subscribe on your favorite platform, leave a review, and help us keep the conversation going. In loving memory of Mary Louise Layton, whose insight and spirit continue to shape this work. To learn more about the show, our mission and vision, or to inquire about sponsorship for guest appearances, visit us online at www.jdhyman.com.